Hi everyone. Hello. Welcome back. Hi guys. Hello, Shayan. Firstly,
Hello.
happy birthday. Oh my god.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. So glad that you could make it. Look, happy birthdays in the chat. So
My
glad you could
heart.
join today for it. Cool. I'll stop talking so you can get on to today's topic, which is intro to Sui Objects, right? And creating your first NFT contract.
Okay, so welcome everybody. Thank you everyone to coming to our third session now. Wow, it's been 3 weeks. So yes, our third session will cover an introduction to Sui Objects and we'll actually create our first NFT project. So yeah, as I said earlier, our agenda for today is going to be going over a brief review of objects. We briefly talked about it last week, but we'll really nail it down this week and we'll actually create our first NFT. So let's jump right into it. So open up a brand new terminal, fresh terminal, and enter in the command sui move new NFT underscore tutorial. And this will be the package in which we'll write our code in today. So once we do that, like I said earlier, we're going to pick up where we left off last week. And we'll be talking about, we'll just briefly review objects before jumping into NFTs. So with that said, please create a new file called object underscore basics.move and populate it with the fields below. Oh, and I should add that the code, the completed code is on the GitHub. And I believe you guys received that last time. It's the same repo in the Sui Foundation organization. So yeah, all the code is there. If I go a little too fast, you can feel free to just copy and paste or look at the code there. So yeah, create a new file called object underscore basics and populate it with these fields as shown below. So let's just review different types of objects because as you may remember, last week we talked about four in particular. So let's go over them right now. So the first category are owned objects. And within owned objects, these fall into one of two categories. So an owned object can be owned by an address or another object. So as you might be able to tell from this function signature, create object owned by an address, it creates an object, object A, and transfers it to the whoever's calling this function, the sender of the function, which is indicated, if you may remember, as transaction context :sender. So all this function does, instantiates a new object, object A, and sends it to the person calling this function. So the next way objects can be owned is owned by another object. And this is accomplished via dynamic object fields, or O fields, or whatever for short, which are a Sui move specific API to enable storing objects inside of other objects. So this will be the main topic for next week's lesson. So we'll only cover it briefly here. So as you can see, this function, create object owned by an object, takes in two parameters, the parent object and the transaction context, because we are creating the new object. So you can see the first line of the function is let child equals object B. And then the second line of the function simply appends that child object to the parent from the parent ID. So yeah, the first field is the mutable reference to the parent ID. The second field is the child object's name, which I just named child, and the actual child object itself. If this is confusing to you, that's okay. I only want to briefly cover this just to prepare you guys, warm you guys up for what we have in store next week. And then the next type of object we talked about is a shared object. So if you guys remember, a shared object means that anyone can read or write to this. And this is directly in contrast to mutable owned objects, which are single writer, meaning that only one person can read or write to them. So in contrast to that, shared objects do have to go through consensus. So with that said, Sui programmers often have the choice to implement a particular use case using shared objects, owned objects, or a combination. And this choice, or the way you want to program your various modules, can have various implications for performance, security, and just implementation complexity in general. And then the last type of object that we talked about were immutable objects. So immutable objects, as the name states, cannot be mutated. And similarly to shared objects, however, they do not have an exclusive owner. So anyone can use an immutable object in a move call. And one thing to note is that all move packages by default are immutable objects themselves. And this just means you can't change a move package after you publish it. But, however, you can convert a move object, like a standard NFT, for example, into an immutable object using the freeze object operation. And that's done here, the transfer : freeze object. And you can only pass in immutable objects in move calls as read-only references. So if you take a look at this example, we instantiated and immediately froze object D. Then anyone who wants to interact with object D will only be able to take the read-only reference. So like the and object D, the ampersand meaning. So with that said, what is the difference between an object and an NFT? If we want to be technical, nothing. So every object in Sui is technically a non-fungible token. And this is because every object has their own unique global identifier. So as you can see in all these examples, we have ID, :UID. These all refer to the unique global identifier that each of these objects have. So you might be thinking, what about fungible tokens? Fungible tokens are still NFTs in a way because they still have their unique global identifier. So with that said, let's take a look at how we can actually create the traditional NFT. So in the same sources directory, create a new file called nft_example.move and populate it with these following imports. So this is all our NFT object looks like. This is a very rudimentary example because this kind of just has like the bare bones requirements of what an NFT could be, right? So besides the ID field, it has name, the name of the NFT, the description, and the URL, which is like the link to the image of that particular NFT. And as you can see, I wrote a comment that says, additional attributes can also exist for various use cases. So for example, if you want to create a game, any object in that game, any like in-game object is still an NFT technically, or like a social profile. So let's say we wanted to create like this on-chain social profile, like a soulbound, like some analogy of a soulbound token that followed us wherever we went. So whenever someone looked up our address, they'd be able to find this little social profile NFT. Like, oh, okay, so this is this user's name. This is like their bio. This is a link to their other social media accounts, so on and so forth. So, but for now, let's just talk about like the rudimentary like JPEG NFT, right? So all we need for that, we don't even need like name or description, right? We could just have a URL and that could be enough. But for now, let's just leave it as name, description, and URL. So if we take a look at this function now, mint to sender, it does exactly what it's going to do, what it said it's going to do. It takes in 3 parameters, name, description, and URL as the vector U8, which means a vector of bytes, and the transaction context, of course, because we are instantiating this new object. And all we do then is fill in the fields, let NFT equals blah, 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 ID, name, description, and then it transfers it to the sender. So whenever you call this function with those various parameters, you can create your own NFT and send it to your own address, which I think is awesome. And before we go further, let's talk about the string and UTF-8 types. So the string type is essentially a dependency to get a type wrapper for UTF-8 strings. And we create this by passing in raw bytes, which is like the vector U8 you see. Oh, and I should add that these 2 snippets are from the Sui standard library. And same thing with the URL. But if you're wondering what new unsafe from bytes means, it's essentially saying that, yeah, because like it's unsafe in the sense that the URL we're passing in is still just a string. So there's no way to check to see if this is a legit URL, which is why it's called unsafe. but nevertheless. So with that said, yeah, so before we go further, this is all we need to do. You can write your own NFT in just a few lines of codes, and you can call this function, which we will at the end of this lesson, so stay tuned, and you'll have an NFT sent to your wallet address. Now let's take a look at another example. So I mentioned this earlier, that another way we can leverage NFTs is in games. So with that said, let's create a new file called onchaingame.move and populate it with these following imports. So you'll see we have three structs: the game admin cap, the struct for the hero, and the struct for the sword. There are declarations. So let's say we were playing an RPG, right? Our hero has their own name, their level, amount of hit points, amount of XP they have. URL refers to like the image of the hero, and sword. So you'll see that sword is shown via option sword. What does that mean? It means that our particular hero can have a sword, but it's not mandatory. So if they're fighting demons or whatever, they can use their fists or they can use a sword. So but before we move further, we're going to say that the sword is wrapped inside hero, and this is different than being owned by hero. And like I said earlier, this is going to be the main topic of our conversation next week with the introduction of dynamic fields. And yeah, so sword has key comma store, as you see, because it can exist as a high level object, meaning it can exist as its own standalone object, and it can exist wrapped inside hero. And fields for sword can just include minimum level, which is like the minimum level the hero has to be in order to wield it, and strength, which is also a U64, which is just how much damage it does per hit. So I'm going to take a little break now, and I'm going to come to the chat to ask this question. So you guys remember this init function, and what we're doing here in this init function is that we're creating a game admin cap, and we're sending it to the transaction context, the sender essentially, right? Whoever is calling this function. So what's a good reason, we covered this last week, why is it a good reason to put this game admin cap in the init function? And I'm going to come to the chat now and see who can answer that. So yeah, I see I see some answers are still slowly starting to roll in. Exactly. So Jana says it happens once. Zach said init is only called once. Aid said so that anyone can't call it, only the deployer. Exactly. So the biggest thing to keep in mind with this init function, why it's so like useful, is that it guarantees that only one game admin cap will ever exist, and that it's only going to belong to the person who published this module. Yeah, so let's go on to this next function now, CreateHero. So as you saw earlier, only the game admin can create a hero, and this is shown from the first argument, right? The blank underscore and a read-only reference to the game admin cap, because we're not doing anything with it. We just need to check to see if it's in our wallet. So only the module publisher can create a hero, and creating a hero, as we saw earlier, similarly to creating an NFT, it's as simple as passing in all the requirement arguments and transferring it to the player of choice. So for example, the name, URL, which is the picture, and then we have player, which is the address that we're going to mint it to. So you saw here that we actually initialize the sword field, right, as none. So when we create a new hero, it's like created without having anything. And that's shown via option : none. So, but what if when we like first declared our hero object, what if we didn't initialize the sword field to begin with? Or what if we later wanted to add shields, but we can't because we didn't have them as a field before? It's the third time I said this now, but dynamic fields. And that'll be, sorry, not next week's lesson because we're taking a break next week because of ETH Denver, but the week after, the fourth session though, nevertheless. So yeah, before we go on, this is how easy it is to just create a new like hero NFT in a game. All you do is pass in the parameters and pass in whatever address you want to mint it to, and that's it. Again, I love Sui because it's so easy. It just makes sense. So let's go on to our next module now. So we talked about on-chain identity, right? Where you can think of like almost like an ID card that's associated with a particular address. So let's create a new file now called onchainidentity.move and populate it with these following imports and that error, the error code. So yeah, so again, we have an admin cap and we have the user profile. So the user profile you can think of as like a card, right? That has all the user's information. So it can have the user's address, the user's name, and you'll see that bio and Twitter handle are optional. So like similarly, if you're looking at like other social profiles, you don't need to have a bio or you don't need to link other social media accounts, right? So this is what this demonstrates here. So all we have to do to create a new profile is to just simply call this function, pass in the name, and bam. As you can see, so let user profile equals user profile instantiates a new object, and the user address is just the function caller, the name is the name, passed as a string, and we're going to instantiate the bio and Twitter handle as none for now, but this can be changed later. And then all we do, we transfer this user profile object, NFT, whatever you want to call it, to the sender of the function. So let's say we want to change our bio. How would we do this? So you'll see that the three parameters we pass in are the user profile that we want to modify, the new bio, like the new bio that we want to write, and then transaction context. So we're going to assert, first of all, that only the user can change their own profile, right? And we do that via that first line, assert transaction context double colon sender, the person calling this function, is the same as the user address of the profile. And if there is a mismatch, then the function will error out and throw that error, E profile mismatch. So it's essentially saying you're trying to edit someone else's bio, which you can't. And then the next line you'll see is let old bio equals option double colon swap or fill. And then it's a mutable reference to the user's bio and the new bio. So it's essentially saying we're appending this or we're mutating this with this new bio. And before we go further, let's talk about what that means. Option, swap, or fill. So this is from the option.move. This is from option.move from the move standard library, and it says exactly what it's going to do. It swaps the old value inside T and returns the old value. And if there is no old value, swap it with E. So essentially it's just saying if there is no bio, add this. If there is a bio, swap it with this new bio. So as you can see, we get that old bio because we have to instantiate. We have to say let old bio equals because we need to get it out. But because we don't care about the old bio anymore, we can just delete it. And we delete it like this, a method that you see below. It's called to destructure it. So we destructure old bio. We're essentially saying that we don't care what happens to it, so let's just get rid of it. So we just deleted the bio, right? The bio itself isn't an object. But can we delete actual objects? And the answer is yes. So as you can see, this delete profile function can only be called by the admin, and its only other parameter is the user profile that the admin wants to delete. So let's say for whatever reason, like maybe a bio was inappropriate or someone was pretending to impersonate someone else, whatever, right? An admin can come in and actually delete it. So what that would look like is this. The user profile is destructured. So you see user address, colon, underscore, comma, all the rest of the fields equals user profile. It just pretty much destroys all the fields. And then you'll see object, double colon, delete ID. So because the globally unique ID cannot be deleted via destructuring, you need to call that actual function, object, double colon, delete. But then once that's done, poof, that profile's out of the picture. So, in summary, every object in Sui is an NFT. So, like the JPEG example we went over earlier, the game that we went over, the hero and the sword, and this on-chain identity, those are all NFTs. And if you were to like open a Sui wallet and see it, they would all be shown as NFTs. So with that said, let's actually publish this module and create our first NFT. So yeah, these are the instructions below. So in a terminal, in the same terminal window, type in Sui client. This essentially like instantiates your first like wallet key pair. So once you type in Sui client, enter Y for yes, you want to connect to a full node server, and then enter 0 for the ED25519 key pair. Then once that is done, you should install the Sui Wallet Chrome extension, and I'll drop the link in the chat below. So this is the link for the Sui Wallet. You can actually install this now. Yeah, if you want to publish this module with me, you can install it now. And you should see that in the previous step, once you created your first key pair, you got your first seed phrase. So go ahead and copy and paste that seed phrase into this wallet you just created. Remember, this is the seed phrase is private, but you're only doing this so you can interact with these NFTs from a front end. So go ahead and copy and paste your seed phrase into the Sui wallet so you can actually view what you do. And then type in this command, Sui client publish NFT example, gas budget 20,000. So essentially what this does is just it publishes the module we just created. So once you do that, you should go to the Sui Explorer, explorer.sui.io, and type in your address. And you should also see your address from when you typed in Sui client. It should give you like the address, your seed phrase, all that good stuff. So once you do that, and like once you published it, if you go to the Sui Explorer, you should see a particular transaction ID corresponding to the published type call. So I just have a bunch of other transactions here, but you'll see, oh, sorry, before I forgot a step. So once you do that, before you publish this, you need actual Sui, right? So go into the Sui wallet and request the faucet, and you should get 0.05 Sui. Once you do that, then you should be able to call the publish command. So yeah, once you do that, once you're able to successfully publish it, you'll see that there is a certain transaction ID that's corresponding to a publish call. So if you click that, you should see this. This is essentially like everything we just published, everything we updated, and the sender. So if you click on updated, the object referring to updated, it's the Sui coin balance, right? Because we use some actual Sui to pay the gas for this particular object to publish this. You'll see there's two objects under created. One of them is going to be the game admin cap, because again, that's like an NFT itself. And the other is the actual modules that we just published. And then sender is our own address. So click on one of the two created links. If you go to the game admin cap, then it must be the other module. And then once you click that, you should see this. So this is the package we just published, and you'll see to the left the different modules we have. So in order, we went through object basics, NFT example, on-chain game, and on-chain identity. So if you click on NFT example, you'll see that it's that actual function that we made mint to sender with the 3 arguments. So if you remember, the 3 arguments in order, argument 0, 1, and 2, are the name, description, and the URL in that order. So yesterday when I did this, I created my very first NFT, right? So for some reason, the selfie I took was upside down. But so I decided to call it an upside down selfie of me. And as you can see, that's the name associated with it. The description says, OMG, isn't this upside down selfie of me awesome? And the URL is just a link to that image. So you could use Arweave, you could use Google Cloud, you could use a Web2 or Web3 provider. I just did Imager just to be quick. But yeah, you could use anything you want to actually upload this image. And then if you go to your wallet, you'll see this NFT tab. Well, if you upload the NFT, you'll see that one of them is NFT itself, and the other no media NFT is the game admin cap. So again, because everything is an object in Sui, even like the game admin cap is represented by an NFT. So thank you so much for listening thus far. We covered everything from learning refreshing what objects are, going over some rudimentary examples of NFTs, like JPEG NFTs, games, and potential like on-chain identity. So if you want to learn more, these first two links are always great. And if you want to talk about publishing packages again, if you want to go more into publishing packages, the third link will be very helpful. So before we end this and go to questions, I'd like to talk about what's coming up next. So yes, as I said earlier, we won't be having a workshop next week because of Sui Denver, but it will be the following Wednesday on March 8th, 2023. And that'll be an introduction to dynamic objects and best design practices. We have our Sui Denver Builder House coming up next week. And if you're going to be in town for Denver, I highly recommend signing up. It's going to be a fun event, and you'll get to see me and a bunch of the other team from Miston Labs and the Sui Foundation. And yeah, that concludes today's presentation. This is a Typeform link to a survey. If you could fill this out, that would be awesome. Please give us feedback. The feedback is very helpful and will be used to make other sessions better. If you think I killed it, please write that. If you think some parts are rough around the edges, please write that as well. And yeah, I guess I'll open the floor now to some questions. So this isn't a question, but I see in the chat, Joe wrote, I need to import the seed into Sui Wallet, right? How can I find my seed via the Sui CLI? So just to go back to this step, right? Once you type in Sui client, if you're typing in Sui client for the first time, you're generating a wallet for the very first time. And you should see that one of the things it spits out is the seed phrase itself. So it'll give like the address, it was successful, blah, 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 and the actual seed phrase. Just copy and paste that seed phrase into the Sui Wallet Chrome extension. Tufan says, is it possible to update all objects? So remember, not all objects, right? We talked about at the beginning that there are immutable objects, right? Immutable objects are by nature immutable. You can only get a read-only reference to them. So Ivan asked, does Sui have on-chain VRF, which stands for verifiable randomness? So if not, how do you get truly random numbers inside the RPG game? So I'm not sure if like true randomness exists yet, but I believe that is something that various teams are working on. So like something like poker will be done on chain, right? Because one of the most important parts of a game like poker, or just any game that depends on randomness, is that there needs to be some way to ensure that it's fair. You know, you don't want one party to be able to pull like aces every time, right? Jagard asked, is it possible to make dynamic NFTs in Sui? Yes, and we'll go over that next week with dynamic fields. How does the option.move module's option : swapper field method, whose signature expects its arguments to be a mutable reference to the vector, accept our user profile struct as a parameter? So let's go through that. So as you can see, the first parameter of this function, the swapper fill function, is the actual like option itself. So if we go back to this example, what we did, we pass in user profile as the argument to the change bio function. But as you can see on line 5, we say and mut, so a mutable reference to the user profile's bio. And that's exactly what T is here. So T refers to bio. Or yeah, it'd be better to look at it here. T refers to bio. T does not refer to user profile. We pass in user profile into this function, but when we call swapper fill, we're not calling user profile, we're calling user profile.bio. Will Sui Wallet be imported into other browsers? I don't know. I think for now it's Google Chrome only. So Akash also asked, is destructuring the returned old object after modifying it necessary to drop it, or does Sui automatically do it for you when the old object goes out of scope? So let's go to that slide. So essentially the most important thing you need to do is just call object :delete to delete the ID. But I just went through and destructured all the fields to like prove that, oh yeah, you can also like delete the individual fields themselves. But the most important thing, and like if you have to do one, it's to actually delete that ID. It's also like good coding practice to know that, okay, if you want to delete that object, let's delete everything. How do you distinguish NFT objects from any other? And like I discussed earlier, there really is no like unique difference between NFTs, like traditional like JPEG NFTs, right, from other objects. And we saw that here, right? In my wallet, there's two objects in my wallet, and it's the upside down selfie of me and the game admin cap that was automatically created when we published this module. So because they're both like objects, because they both have this unique ID, there really is no way to identify it. But like one way, for example, is that you see that like the actual selfie NFT of me has that URL field which points to a particular like image online, right? Whereas the other one doesn't. So if you were to click this, you'd be able to see that, oh, one is like an NFT. You'll be able to see its metadata. So that's like one way you can like go through it, but via the metadata. Pavlo asked, does Sui have some standardized NFT implementation, own version of ERC 721 and ERC 1115 standards? So no, there is no standard NFT yet. I should say yet. There are a bunch of teams currently working on building out these standards for the community. And that's one of the best things, in my opinion, about the Sui community is that like already, even before mainnet launch, there are a bunch of teams that are working and like talking to other members in the team with regards to how these NFT standards should look like. Pablo also asked, is there a way to check in runtime if object compiles some interface that implements a certain set of functions? So yeah, like as you saw here, sorry, not at runtime, but once you deploy a package, you can go through like the various modules and see, oh, these are the functions that require like this particular object. So in this case, it's just argument 0, which is a vector of bytes. But let's say like one of the arguments, like if we were to go to like on-chain identity, right? And it says that like in order to delete an object, you need the game admin cap. The little grayed out like field would be the actual object ID for that game admin cap. How can I find the seed if I ran Sui client before? I already have 5 addresses displayed. Oh, I believe there is another function. Yeah, I think I don't know it off the top of my head, but yeah, if you go to this link, docs.sui.io, blah, 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 publish packages, there should be a list of all the CLI commands you can call. And I believe one of them should be able to give you that seed phrase. Or I think you can also go through your files. You can go to like .cargo/.sui. It's like the config file, and you can find the private key directly. For the user profile delete, would ID, comma, colon be valid? No. So that's one of the checks that the Sui compiler does. We cannot. So if we were to do like ID, colon, underscore, comma, it would throw an error because we cannot delete IDs like that because it's an object. We would have to manually call object : delete. I see wallet shows URL as an image. Can we say the URL properties is standard now? What if we use that field for something else? Would it still try to fetch it? So again, because this is still like at a rudimentary stage for now, yeah, URL refers to like image URL. But it's not a standard that's set in stone. So yeah, that's the best I can say for now. Does contract code upload and contract instantiation happen in a single transaction, or can code be separately instantiated? So contract, I'm not sure I answer your question. So like, for example, when we like publish this package, all 4 modules were published, right? And since we only had one init function in these 4 modules, only only that part of that indent function was automatically published, and that was the game admin cap. Tufan asked, if everything in Sui is an object, each Sui coin is a different object, right? How do we know a fraction of it? So what's awesome is that a lot of the GigaBrain teams building on Sui have taken this into account. So if you remember from our last session, coin, we said that coin is a wraparound balance. So yes, there is that coin object in our wallet, and you'll see, and the front end would be able to see that, oh yeah, one of the fields, or for example, the coin has the balance field, and they'll be able to read it from there. So that's how we're able to tell like fractional pieces of a coin. And it looks like the last question of the day is, I want to ask, does Encode Sui have a community? If you follow our Twitter, if you follow the Encode Twitter, you'll be able to keep up with updates there. And I believe in our Discord, I may be wrong though, I think there was a channel added just for like Encode Sui participants. Akash asked, which is the best place to look for jobs and early teams building on Sui? So I believe I saw something, it's like a informal thing, like a community member was working on building like a Sui jobs board.
Thank you so much, Shayan, for the amazing session again. And thank you everyone for being so engaged. Great questions today, really specific. So that was really awesome to see. Yes, again in the chat, happy birthday, Shayan. And
thank you, everybody. That means a lot to me. I wouldn't want to spend my birthday doing anything other than teaching Sui Mu. Best birthday ever.
Amazing. I'm so glad. I'm sure we are all also very, very grateful that you're here. So yes, like Shayan said, next week we're off. We're taking a little break, but we'll be back for the last 3 sessions the week after. And everything's flying by so quickly.
I know we're halfway done.
Yeah.
When you think about it like that. That's pretty insane.
It is pretty crazy. And also to answer your question, if Sui doesn't have an Encode specific area for this program, we do in the Encode server. So I think I dropped the links slightly further up on how to join both the Encode Club server and the Sui server. So just click on those links, and also you can DM me if you are having any problems with that. Just message me here. You too, Leo. Let's just message me on here so that we can keep this session based on the session topic. But yeah, thank you so much everyone for coming, and I guess we can end the event there.
Sounds good. Bye everyone.
All right. Bye. Thank you so much for coming.